The game that changed the world. History of soccer. Chapter 1. The ball that started everything. The boy sprints barefoot across a muddy field, heart hammering, lungs burning. He kicks a round bundle of rags, and it sails through the air. High, beautiful, free. His friends erupt in cheers. They have no proper goal. They have no referee. They have no rule book. But they have this, the wild electric joy of chasing something and sending it flying with their feet. That moment has happened millions of times across thousands of years, and every single time it started the same way, with a ball, a foot, and the pure human need to play. Here is the most surprising thing about soccer. Nobody invented it. No single person woke up one morning with a brilliant idea. Soccer grew, slowly and messily, across dozens of civilizations, each one adding something new, a rule here, a goalpost there, a different kind of ball, until one day, the world looked down and saw the game it could not live without. Today, over 250 million people play soccer in more than 200 countries. That makes it the most popular sport in the history of the human race. More popular than basketball, more popular than cricket, more popular than every other sport combined, in terms of how many people love it, play it, and live for it.
But how did a bundle of rags, or a stuffed animal bladder, or a rubber sphere, become the thing that unites the whole world?
That question has haunted sports historians for centuries. The answer stretches from ancient China to medieval England, from crumbling stone carvings to the first printed rulebook, from a muddy English schoolyard to the gleaming stadiums of the FIFA World Cup. By the time this story ends, you will know exactly how it happened, and you might never look at a soccer ball the same way again.
Chapter 2. Ancient Kicks.
The first footballers. Close your eyes. Picture China, 2,000 years ago. The Han Dynasty rules an empire of 60 million people. Soldiers drill in open courtyards beneath the summer sun, their sandals slapping stone, their generals watching from shaded pavilions. Between training sessions, the soldiers play a game called kuju, which means simply, kick the ball. The ball is a leather sphere stuffed with feathers and hair. The goal is a silk net stretched between two bamboo poles, 30 feet high. Players sprint, pass, and shoot, and they use only their feet. No hands allowed. You are there. The air smells of dust and sweat. A soldier to your left fakes left and breaks right. He receives a pass on the inside of his boot, thwack, and drives the ball straight at the net. The silk billows. The crowd roars. His general nods, satisfied. A soldier who could play kuju was also a soldier who could move fast, pivot sharply, and think on his feet. Kuju was not just entertainment. The Chinese military used it as official training. Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty loved watching it so much that he organized royal tournaments with hundreds of spectators. Women played kuju too. Stone carvings from the Han Dynasty show female players mid-kick, hair pinned up, robes flowing, completely focused on the ball. Archaeologists have found written records of kuju dating back to 476 BC. That is over 2,500 years ago. If you lined up 2,500 years of human history, each year as a single step, you would walk roughly the length of 2 football pitches just to reach the moment when someone in ancient China first thought, kick the ball through that hole. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the ancient Greeks played a game called episkairos. Players formed 2 teams and tried to throw or kick a ball over the opposing team's line. A Roman stone carving from around 200 BC shows a young man balancing a ball on his knee. The same trick kids do at soccer practice today. The Romans called their version harpastum, a fast, rough game where players tackled each other viciously to keep possession of a small, hard ball. Across the Pacific Ocean, the ancient Mesoamerican civilizations, the Olmec, the Maya, the Aztec, played an intense ball game using a solid rubber ball. Rubber trees grew in the jungles of Central America, and the Mesoamericans learned to harvest the sap and shape it into balls as far back as 3,500 years ago. Their game had stone rings mounted high on the walls of great stone courts, and players had to shoot the ball through the ring using only their hips, knees, and elbows, never their hands. The stakes were extraordinary. Some historians believe the losing team was sacrificed to the gods. Others think it was the winning team, proof that the game was so sacred. Only the best deserved to be offered to the heavens. Either way, the players who entered those stone courts were not playing for fun. They were playing for their lives. How does a child in ancient China, a soldier in ancient Greece, and a warrior in ancient Mexico all end up inventing different versions of the same game? That question has no clean answer. Maybe it is simply what humans do. Give a person a round object, and they will kick it. Give them a friend, and they will compete. Give them enough space, and they will build a world. That world was only just beginning to take shape, and its next chapter would rise from the mud and chaos of medieval England. Chapter 3. Mob Football, the wildest game in history. Picture a town in England, around the year 1100 AD. It is Shrove Tuesday, the day before Lent, when Christians fast for 40 days. The whole village is celebrating. Someone produces a ball. Someone else kicks it, and suddenly 200 people are screaming, running, tackling, shoving, and stampeding through the streets of town. Welcome to mob football, quite possibly the most violent, most chaotic, and most thrilling game ever played. Mob football had almost no rules. Two teams, sometimes entire neighboring villages, tried to move a ball from one end of a town to the other. The goals were sometimes miles apart. Players could kick, carry, punch, and wrestle for the ball. Shops got smashed, windows shattered, farmers' fences collapsed. Horses bolted in terror from the thundering crowd. You are there. The cobblestones are slippery with rain and mud. A man twice your size barrels toward you, eyes wild, arms outstretched. You duck. You kick the ball sideways to your cousin. He sprints down the narrow alley between two stone buildings, the ball bouncing wildly off the walls, the crowd roaring behind him like a wave. Somewhere ahead, across a field, down a hill, over a bridge, lies the goal, a mill door on the other side of town. Getting there might take 3 hours. It might take all day. Nobody minded. The chaos was the point. English kings tried desperately to stop mob football. King Edward II banned it in London in 1314, complaining that the game caused great noise in the city. King Edward III banned it in 1331. King Henry IV banned it again in 1409. Over the next 3 centuries, English rulers issued at least 30 separate laws against mob football. Every single law failed. Why? Because the people loved it. Poor people, rich people, farmhands and blacksmiths and merchants, everyone played. The game gave ordinary people a chance to feel powerful, to compete, to win. No king could stamp that out with a piece of parchment. The balls they used during this period were usually inflated pig bladders, literally the internal organs of pigs, blown up like balloons and tied at one end. They were lumpy, unpredictable, and burst easily. When a bladder burst in the middle of a game, players would wrestle over the deflated remains, unwilling to stop. The game mattered more than the ball. Different towns developed slightly different versions. In some places, players could not use their hands at all, only their feet. In others, you could do whatever you wanted, as long as you moved the ball forward. Slowly, incredibly slowly, across hundreds of years, the kicking version began to win out. Villages that played kick only found that the game moved faster, required more skill, and produced more exciting moments. But it was still mob football, and deeply beloved by everyone except the king. The next step toward the modern game would come from an unlikely place, the cold, rainy schoolyards of England's most elite private schools. And there, 2 groups of students would argue so furiously about the rules that they would accidentally create 2 entirely different sports. Chapter 4. The Great Debate: Feet versus Hands. In the early 1800s, English private schools, called public schools in England confusingly, played their own versions of football. Each school had its own rules. Rugby school allowed players to pick up the ball and run with it. Eton College insisted the ball stay on the ground. Winchester College played a narrow game down long grass alleys. Harrow School played on a muddy field where only kicking counted. When students from different schools tried to play each other, disaster struck. Nobody could agree on the rules. Arguments erupted. Players quit in fury. Some games ended in fistfights. Something had to change. In 1848, representatives from several schools met at Cambridge University and hammered out the first serious attempt at a common set of rules. The Cambridge rules banned carrying the ball and tried to standardize the game. It was a start, but only a start. Many schools refused to accept the new rules. Then came the moment that split football into two. In 1863, a group of men met at the Freemasons' Tavern in London. They represented various football clubs, organized teams of adults who played football after work and on weekends. They argued for hours.
The central question was brutal in its simplicity. Could you pick up the ball and run with it or not? The answer would define the future of the sport. One man named Ebenezer Morley wanted strict rules: no handling, no hacking, kicking opponents in the shins, no tripping. Others screamed that removing hacking would destroy the game's toughness. One representative reportedly said that without hacking, football would become a game for women. A ridiculous statement, since women would prove themselves magnificent footballers for the next 2 centuries. After 6 meetings and ferocious debate, the group produced the laws of the game on October 26, 1863. They called themselves the Football Association, the FA. Their rules banned carrying the ball. They banned hacking. They defined a proper playing field, goals, and the basic structure of the game. The clubs who refused to accept these rules, the ones who wanted to keep running with the ball, walked out. They eventually formed their own game, rugby football, named after the school where the running and carrying style had always been played. And so, on a single rainy evening in a London pub, association football, soccer, was officially born. The word soccer itself comes from this moment. English schoolboys loved to add to the ends of words as slang. Association football became ASOC, which became soccer. The word jumped across the Atlantic Ocean to America, where it stuck permanently because in America, a different game called football already existed. In England, they simply kept calling it football. Both names point back to that same tavern, that same argument, that same night in 1863. One argument created the most popular game on earth, and the men who had it probably had no idea what they had just done. Chapter 5. The rules take shape. The 1863 laws of the game were simple by today's standards. No goalkeepers, no offside rule, no penalty kicks, no crossbars on the goal, just 2 posts with a string between them. Players wore whatever clothes they liked, usually just their regular trousers and boots. But the game moved fast. New rules arrived almost every year as players discovered gaps, loopholes, and problems. You are there. The year is 1870. You are watching one of the first proper football matches on a muddy park in London. 11 men in white shirts face 11 men in dark blue. There are no lines on the ground. The players estimate where the sideline is. When the ball rolls out of bounds, 2 players from opposite teams race to be first to throw it back in. The first one to grab it gets possession. Fights break out constantly over whose turn it is. The referee does not stand on the pitch. He sits in a chair on the sideline, called upon only when players appeal to him, like a judge. The players are supposed to play fair and govern themselves. You can guess how well that worked. By 1871, the FA introduced the FA Cup, the world's first knockout football competition. 15 clubs entered. Wanderers FC won the inaugural final in 1872, beating Royal Engineers 1-0. The trophy was a small silver cup, and the winning players carried it through the streets of London on their shoulders, cheering madly. That same year, England played Scotland in the first international football match. The game ended 0-0, but both teams considered it a triumph. England and Scotland would play each other every year after that, fueling one of the fiercest football rivalries in history. In 1878, referees first used a whistle to control games. Before the whistle, referees waved handkerchiefs, which nobody could see or hear in the noise of a crowd. The whistle changed everything. A sharp blast cut through the roar of the crowd and froze every player on the pitch. The crossbar replaced the tape between goalposts in 1875. The goalkeeper was recognized as a distinct position in 1871. Before that, any player could handle the ball to stop a goal. The penalty kick arrived in 1891, after a goalkeeper deliberately handled the ball on the goal line to stop a certain goal. The crowd was outraged. The FA responded within a year. The offside rule went through multiple versions, confusing players and fans for decades. The basic idea, that you could not receive a pass if you were ahead of all the defenders, prevented players from simply camping near the opponent's goal and waiting for the ball. It forced teams to build attacks properly. Each new rule made the game more skillful, more tactical, and more exciting to watch. More people came to watch it, and as more people watched, clubs realized they could charge admission. And as they charged admission, the game grew wealthier. And with wealth came professionalism. The age of the amateur was ending. The age of the professional footballer was about to begin, and it would change soccer and the world forever. Chapter 6. From Hobby to Profession. In the early days of football, players held regular jobs. A baker played on Saturdays. A factory worker kicked a ball on his lunch break. Football was a hobby, passionate, fiercely competitive, but still a hobby. But something was happening in northern England that would change all of that. The Industrial Revolution had transformed England's northern cities, Manchester, Sheffield, Birmingham, Liverpool, into roaring centres of factories and mills. Thousands of workers poured into these cities from the countryside. They worked brutal 12-hour shifts. They lived in crowded row houses. And on Saturday afternoons they flooded into football grounds to watch their local clubs play. These fans were hungry for winning, not just any players, the best players. And some clubs began quietly paying their star players to play for them. It was illegal under FA rules, which demanded that football remain amateur. But the payments happened anyway, in secret, slipped into brown envelopes after matches. In 1884, Upton Park FC, a London club, complained that Preston North End had paid their players. Preston did not deny it. They simply argued that paying players should be legal. The argument exploded across English football. Clubs in the north, with their massive working-class fan bases and growing gate receipts, needed the best players. The only way to attract and keep them was with money. In 1885, the FA gave in. Professional football became legal. Players could now earn a wage for playing. The maximum wage was set at £1 per week. Not a fortune, but enough for a skilled player to make football his career instead of his hobby. 3 years later, in 1888, 12 clubs formed the Football League, the world's first professional football league. Matches were scheduled in advance, with each club playing the others home and away. Points were awarded for wins and draws. The club with the most points at the end of the season won the league championship. The first Football League season ended with Preston North End winning every single match, an unbeaten season that would not be matched for over a century. Preston's team included Scottish players who had been recruited specifically for their skill. Fans called Preston the Invincibles. Crowds grew extraordinary quickly. By the 1890s, some matches attracted 20,000 fans. By 1901, the FA Cup final drew 110,000 people to Crystal Palace Stadium, the largest crowd ever recorded at a sporting event up to that point in history. Football had become the working man's religion. On Saturday afternoons, factories emptied, streets filled, the smell of hot pies drifted through the turnstiles. Scarves in club colours, red for Liverpool, blue for Everton, black and white stripes for Newcastle, appeared everywhere. Men who had nothing else in common found brotherhood in their club's colours. The game had begun as a chaotic mob. It had found its rules in a London pub, and now it was building cathedrals of brick and steel, where thousands of people gathered every week to worship the beautiful game. But football was not satisfied with just one country. The game had bigger ambitions. It was about to conquer the world. Chapter 7. Football Goes Global. Picture a British sailor stepping off a ship in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the 1860s. He carries a football in his kit bag. He has an afternoon free. He finds a flat piece of ground near the docks. He kicks the ball to a friend. An Argentine boy watches from a distance. He edges closer. The sailor waves him over. The boy kicks the ball back, grinning. That is how football traveled the world. British sailors, traders, engineers and teachers carried football to every corner of the globe during the late 19th century. Wherever British ships docked, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, football followed. It required almost nothing, just a ball and open ground. You did not need wealth or equipment or a fancy facility. Any open field would do. In Brazil, the first football clubs appeared in the 1890s. A young man named Charles Miller returned home to Sao Paulo in 1894 after studying in England. He brought 2 footballs in his luggage,
He taught the rules to workers at a railway station. Within a decade, Brazil had dozens of clubs. Within a century, Brazil would win 5 FIFA World Cup titles, more than any nation on earth. In Germany, British expatriates introduced football to Hamburg and Dresden in the 1870s. German workers adopted the game enthusiastically. The first German football club, BC Germania Hamburg, was founded in 1887. Germany would eventually win 4 World Cups of its own. In Spain, the first football clubs appeared in the Basque Country in the 1890s, brought by British mining engineers working in the iron ore fields near Bilbao. The workers and their Spanish colleagues played together at lunchtime. Athletic Bilbao, one of the oldest clubs in Spain, traces its roots directly to those British engineers. Real Madrid and Barcelona would later become the 2 most famous clubs on earth, their rivalry filling stadiums and dominating headlines across the globe. In Africa, British colonial officials introduced football to their colonies, but the African people made the game entirely their own. Nations like Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Senegal developed fierce football cultures that would one day shake the foundations of World Cup tournaments. By 1900, football had spread to over 30 countries. By 1910, it had reached 60. The game moved faster than any empire, crossed borders that armies could not cross, and connected people who shared no language, religion, or history, only a ball and 2 goals. Something needed to organize all of this. The patchwork of clubs, national associations, and different rule variations needed a single governing body. And so, on May 21, 1904, representatives from France, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland met in Paris and founded FIFA, the Fédération Internationale de Football Association. England, birthplace of organized football, was not at that founding meeting. The English FA considered itself too important to join an organization started by foreigners. They joined a year later, somewhat grudgingly. FIFA began organizing international competitions. In 1908, football appeared at the Olympic Games in London, the first time it was played as an official Olympic sport. Great Britain won the gold medal. But Olympics football had a problem. Only amateur players could compete. The best players in the world, the professionals, were excluded. Football needed its own world championship. It needed something bigger than the Olympics, something that belonged entirely to the beautiful game. That dream was about to become reality, and when it did, it would change the way the entire world understood sport. Chapter 8. The World Cup is born. The year is 1930. The place is Montevideo, Uruguay, a small country tucked between Argentina and Brazil on the eastern coast of South America. The month is July, winter in the southern hemisphere. 13 teams have traveled to Uruguay from across the world. Many European nations refused the invitation, unwilling to make the long ocean voyage, 3 weeks by ship, in the middle of their football seasons. But the teams that came are desperate to win. A new trophy sits waiting in FIFA's offices, a golden cup shaped like an octagon with a figure of a footballer on top. The Jules Rimet Trophy, the FIFA World Cup. You are there. Estadio Centenario, Century Stadium, has just been completed in time for the final. It holds 93,000 people, and every seat is full. The stands shake with noise, banners wave, vendors sell food through the crowds. On the pitch, Uruguay face Argentina, fierce rivals who share a river border, a common language, and decades of bitter football competition. Argentina score first, then again. At halftime, Argentina lead 2-1. The Uruguayan crowd falls silent. Then Uruguay erupt. They score 3 goals in the second half. The stadium shakes so hard the press box rattles. When the final whistle blows, Uruguay have won 4-2. They are the first FIFA World Cup champions in history. Players weep on the pitch. Fans pour from the stands. In Montevideo, the streets fill with celebrating crowds. The Uruguayan government declares a national holiday. The World Cup had arrived, and nothing in football would ever be the same. FIFA organized the World Cup every 4 years, except during World War II, when 2 tournaments, 1942 and 1946, were cancelled while the world tore itself apart. When the tournament resumed in Brazil in 1950, the entire world stopped to watch. The 1950 World Cup produced the greatest upset in football history. The United States, a nation that barely played football, defeated England 1-0 in the group stage.
England, the nation that invented organized football, beaten by a team of part-time players that included a teacher, a hearse driver, and a dishwasher. Headlines in England described the result as a typing error. Reporters assumed the scoreline must be wrong. It was not wrong. The 1958 World Cup in Sweden introduced the world to a 17-year-old Brazilian boy who would become the most famous footballer who ever lived. His name was Edson Arantes do Nascimento. The world knew him by one word: Pelé. Pelé scored 6 goals in that tournament, including a stunning hat-trick against France in the semi-final. In the final against Sweden, he scored 2 goals, the second a breathtaking improvisation where he flicked the ball over a defender's head, caught it on his chest, and volleyed it into the net before it touched the ground. The stadium, filled mostly with Swedish fans, gave him a standing ovation. Pelé was 17 years and 249 days old. He remains to this day the youngest player ever to score in a World Cup final. Football had found its greatest stage. Now it needed its greatest players. And they were already being born, in the favelas of Brazil, the streets of Argentina, the slums of Africa, and the council estates of England, waiting for their moment to step into the light. Chapter 9. The Legends. Players who changed everything. Some players do not just play the game. They rewrite what the game can be. They show the world possibilities it never imagined. They make you lean forward in your seat, hold your breath, and see something you will tell your grandchildren about. Here are the ones who changed everything. Pelé played his entire career at Santos FC in Brazil and the New York Cosmos in America. He scored 1,281 goals in 1,363 official matches, a record so staggering that the Brazilian government once declared him a national treasure and prevented other clubs from buying him. He won 3 World Cups with Brazil, 1958, 1962, and 1970, an achievement no player has ever matched. In 1970, his Brazilian team played what many historians call the greatest football ever seen, combining speed, skill, and joy in a style that made the rest of the world feel they were watching a dream. You are there at the 1970 World Cup final in Mexico City. The air is thin at altitude, 7,200 feet above sea level, and every sprint feels like running through water. But the Brazilians do not slow down. Pelé receives the ball with his back to goal. He dummies one defender. He flicks a pass to his right. He calls for the return. The pass comes. He strikes. Goal. Brazil 4, Italy 1. In the press box, grown men are weeping. They are not sad. They simply cannot contain what they have just witnessed. Johan Cruyff of the Netherlands invented a new way to play football in the 1970s. His team, Ajax Amsterdam, developed a system called total football, where every player could play every position, flowing across the pitch in a constant shifting pattern that left opponents dizzy. Cruyff could run at defenders and stock so sharply that his body seemed to defy physics. He invented a move, a sharp drag-back turn that left defenders stranded, that is still called the Cruyff turn 50 years later. Netherlands reached the 1974 World Cup final, playing the most beautiful football the world had seen since Brazil in 1970, and lost to West Germany 2-1 in a game that still breaks Dutch hearts. Diego Maradona of Argentina was barely 5 feet 5 inches tall and had the ball control of a magician. In the 1986 World Cup quarter-final against England, he scored 2 goals in the same match that stand at opposite ends of the spectrum of human behavior. The first he scored with his hand, illegally, and told the referee it was the hand of God. The second, 5 minutes later, he dribbled past 5 English players and the goalkeeper in a run of 60 meters that took 11 seconds and has been voted the greatest goal in World Cup history. Both moments happened in the same match. Both were entirely Maradona. Brilliant, maddening, impossible to look away from. Marta of Brazil changed what the world believed women's football could be. She is the highest scorer in FIFA World Cup history across both men's and women's tournaments, with 17 goals. She grew up in the tiny Brazilian town of Dois Riachos, so poor that she kicked a grapefruit around the dusty streets because her family could not afford a proper ball. She became 6-time FIFA Women's World Player of the Year, a record. When she played, defenders double-teamed her, triple-teamed her, and still could not stop her. She once said, "Women's football depends on you to survive." She was right. She also made sure it did. Ronaldo Luis Nazario, not Cristiano Ronaldo. was the greatest striker of his generation. He moved with terrifying speed despite being powerfully built, with a first touch so precise it seemed like the ball was magnetized to his feet. At the 1998 World Cup, he played in the final against France, despite suffering a mysterious seizure the night before, a decision that still divides football historians. He played poorly. France won 3-0. But in 2002, Ronaldo returned to the World Cup final and scored twice against Germany to win the title. He stood in the center of the pitch after the final whistle, arms spread wide, tears streaming down his face, making up for everything in a single afternoon. Mia Hamm of the United States transformed women's football in America. She won 2 Olympic gold medals and 2 World Cups. She scored 158 international goals, a world record when she retired. She was so dominant that Pelé once called her the best footballer in the world, not the best female footballer, the best in the world, full stop. Girls across America grew up wanting to be Mia Hamm. Many of them eventually surpassed her. That was her greatest achievement. These players did not just win. They expanded the imagination of everyone who watched them. Players, coaches, fans, and children kicking balls in dusty streets, who suddenly believed they could do something extraordinary too. Chapter 10. Women's Football. The Fight to Play. Here is a fact that will make your jaw drop. In 1921, the Football Association of England officially banned women from playing on FA-affiliated grounds. The ban lasted 50 years. 50 years. To understand why that ban existed, and why it was so wrong, you need to go back to World War I. During World War I, 1914 to 1918, millions of British men went to fight in France and Belgium. Women stepped into the factories to make weapons, ammunition, and supplies. They worked brutal shifts. They organized themselves. They played football during their lunch breaks to blow off steam. And they were extraordinary at it. One team, Dick Kerr Ladies FC of Preston, drew massive crowds wherever they played. On Boxing Day 1920, December 26, they played against St. Helens Ladies at Goodison Park, home of Everton FC. The stadium held 53,000 fans. Another 10,000 stood outside, unable to get in. The crowd for that women's match was larger than the average attendance at many men's First Division games. The FA panicked. They claimed without any medical evidence whatsoever that football was unsuitable for females and caused physical harm. They voted to ban women from using FA grounds. Dick Kerr Ladies had to play on rugby fields and cricket grounds instead. But they kept playing. They toured North America in 1922, playing 9 games in Canada and the United States. They continued for decades, carrying on the game in the face of every obstacle thrown at them. When the FA finally lifted the ban in 1971, women's football erupted back into public life with unstoppable force. UEFA, the European governing body, organized the first European Women's Championship in 1984. FIFA organized the first Women's World Cup in 1991 in China, won by the United States. The 1999 Women's World Cup final in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, became one of the most iconic moments in sports history. The United States played China in front of 90,185 fans, the largest crowd ever to watch a women's sporting event at that time. After 120 minutes of scoreless football, the match went to a penalty shootout. Brandi Chastain stepped up for the final penalty. She struck it low and to the left. The Chinese goalkeeper went the wrong way. Chastain fell to her knees on the Rose Bowl turf, pulled off her jersey, and swung it over her head, screaming in joy. The photograph appeared on the front page of newspapers across the world. It became one of the most recognizable sports images ever taken. Women's football had arrived, and it was not going anywhere. Today, the FIFA Women's World Cup draws over 1 billion television viewers. The National Women's Soccer League in America fills stadiums. The English Women's Super League sells out Wembley Stadium. Women like Sam Kerr of Australia, Alexia Putellas of Spain, and Ada Hegerberg of Norway earn professional contracts worth millions. The women who played in secret in English factory yards during World War I could never have imagined it. Chapter 11. Tactics and the Beautiful Science. Football looks simple. Kick the ball into the goal. Stop the other team from doing the same. But beneath that simplicity lies a world of tactics so complex that coaches have written entire books about it. Mathematicians have built models to analyze it, and philosophers have compared it to chess. The earliest professional football teams used a formation called 2-3-5, 2 defenders, 3 midfielders, 5 attackers. The idea was straightforward: flood the opponent's goal with attackers and score more often than they can. Defense was almost an afterthought. Then teams started pressing higher up the pitch, cutting off supply to those 5 attackers. Coaches countered by pulling 1 attacker back into midfield, creating 3-2-5. Then WM formation, which England's Herbert Chapman pioneered with Arsenal in the 1920s. Chapman's Arsenal dominated English football for a decade. After Uruguay's World Cup triumphs in 1950, teams began experimenting with a 4-2-4, 4 defenders, 2 midfielders, 4 attackers, but balanced defense and attack. Brazil used this formation to win the 1958 World Cup. Then, they refined it into 4-3-3 and 4-4-2, which became the dominant formations of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. Each formation tells a story about what the team values. A 5-4-1 says, we protect what we have. A 4-3-3 says, we attack from wide. A 3-5-2 says, we control the middle. Choosing the wrong formation against the right opponent can cost a team the game before anyone has touched the ball. You are there. You are a midfielder in a 4-3-3 system. Before the match, your coach has drawn 17 diagrams on a whiteboard. Your job is to press the opposing centre-backs when they have the ball, cutting off the passing lane to their midfield. If the ball goes wide, you track their right back, never letting him turn and drive forward. You are not just running, you are thinking, constantly, 2 moves ahead. The ball is with their centre-back, you sprint toward him, he panics, he passes sideways to his partner. Your striker cuts off that pass. The centre-back hesitates, your team have trapped him. He boots the ball long. Your defender heads it clear. Your team have the ball. Now the attack begins. That sequence took 3 seconds. It was the result of hours of training, preparation, and tactical planning. Pressing became the dominant tactical concept of the 2010s, pioneered by German coach Ralf Rangnick and perfected by Jurgen Klopp at Dortmund and Liverpool. Pressing means hunting the ball in packs, surrounding the player with the ball, cutting off all his options, forcing a mistake. Klopp called it gegenpressing. His Liverpool team pressed so intensely that opposition coaches said it felt like being chased by wolves. Positional play, popularized by Pep Guardiola at Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and Manchester City, takes the opposite approach. Instead of hunting the ball, you control space. You spread your players across the pitch in precise positions that always give the ball carrier 3 options. You pass short, move quickly, and circulate the ball until the opponent's shape breaks apart like a sandcastle in the tide. Both approaches work. Both require extraordinary fitness, intelligence, and teamwork. Both are beautiful in their own way, one like a storm, one like a river. The science of tactics is still evolving. Every World Cup, every Champions League final brings something new, a new formation, a new pressing trigger, a new way of organizing 10 outfield players that nobody thought to try before. The game that started with 200 people chasing a pig bladder through English streets now features mathematicians tracking GPS data from every player's movement, analyzing 1 million data points per match. Football has always been beautiful. Now it is beautiful and precise. Chapter 12. The World Cup. Greatest show on Earth. Every 4 years, the planet stops. Not all of it, technically, but close enough. The FIFA World Cup brings together 32 nations, 48 from 2026 onward, in a month-long tournament that generates more television viewers than any other event in human history. The 2022 World Cup in Qatar drew 5 billion cumulative viewers, more than half the human population of Earth. What makes the World Cup different from everything else?
It is the only time that football completely transcends the club game. Players who fight bitterly against each other for Manchester City and Liverpool, Barcelona and Real Madrid suddenly pull on the same jersey and become teammates. The flag on their chest means more than the crest. National pride, not salary, drives them. The World Cup has produced moments that exist outside of ordinary time. Moments that people who were not even alive when they happened can describe in perfect detail because they have been told about them so many times. Italy 1990. A tournament of suffocating defense and low-scoring matches until an 18-year-old Irish-Italian midfielder named Salvatore Schillaci came off the bench and scored goal after goal for Italy, lighting up the tournament with a wide-eyed intensity that seemed almost frightened by his own brilliance. He scored 6 goals, won the Golden Boot, and was never quite as good again. Some flowers bloom once, and never again. France 1998. Host nation France, led by the near-silent midfield genius Zinedine Zidane, the son of Algerian immigrants who grew up in a tough neighborhood in Marseille, won the World Cup on home soil. In the final against Brazil, Zidane headed in 2 goals. 60,000 fans in the Stade de France sang the French national anthem so loudly the press box vibrated. South Africa 2010. The first World Cup on African soil. The sound of vuvuzelas, plastic horns blown by fans, filled every stadium with a roar like 10,000 swarms of bees. Spain won their first World Cup, playing a controlled passing game that swept aside every opponent. Andrés Iniesta scored the winning goal against the Netherlands in the final in extra time, with the score at 0-0. He pulled off his jersey and pointed to the sky, honoring a friend who had died of cancer that year. The moment lasted 3 seconds. Millions of people wept. Qatar 2022. Argentina, led by Lionel Messi in what everyone knew was his last World Cup, played a tournament of almost unbearable drama. They lost their opening match to Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest upsets in World Cup history. They fought back through the group stage, through the knockout rounds, winning on penalties against the Netherlands and Croatia. France's Kylian Mbappé scored a hat-trick to pull France back to 3-3 in the final minutes. The match went to extra time, then penalties. Argentina held their nerve. When the final penalty hit the net, Messi collapsed to the turf. He had waited for this his entire life. 17 years as a professional footballer, 4 World Cup tournaments, a career draped in every other honor but this one. His teammates buried him in a screaming pile of joy. 88,966 people in Lusail Stadium erupted as one. Messi stood up. He lifted the trophy. The golden light caught it. And somewhere in the world, in a dusty street, a child who had been watching on a small screen picked up a ball and started kicking it. The cycle continues. It always does. Chapter 13. Club football, the other religion. If the World Cup is Christmas, club football is every other day of the year. And for billions of fans, it matters even more. Club football runs on loyalty. You do not choose your club based on analysis. You choose it because your father supported them, or because you grew up near the stadium, or because you were 7 years old and a player in their jersey scored a goal that made you feel something you had never felt before. Once you choose, you almost never change. Supporting your club is not a hobby. It is an identity. The UEFA Champions League, originally called the European Cup when it began in 1955, brings together the best clubs from every European nation to compete for the most prestigious trophy in club football. The final, played each May, draws audiences of 400 million television viewers worldwide. Real Madrid have won the Champions League 14 times, more than any other club. Their 1950s and 60s teams, featuring the Hungarian genius Ferenc Puskás and the Argentine maestro Alfredo Di Stefano, played football of such elegance that clubs from across Europe traveled to watch their training sessions just to study how they moved. Liverpool FC have won 6 Champions League titles and built one of the most passionate fan cultures in the world. Their home ground, Anfield, has a tradition called You'll Never Walk Alone. Before every home match, 54,000 fans sing the old Rodgers and Hammerstein song in such perfect unison that visiting players say it makes the hairs on their arms stand up before a ball has even been kicked. FC Barcelona developed one of the most distinctive football philosophies in history. Their youth academy, La Masia, the farmhouse, has produced more Ballon d'Or winners awarded to the world's best player each year than any other academy. Their academy produced Lionel Messi, Xavi Hernandez, Andrés Iniesta, Carles Puyol, and Victor Valdez, all from the same small building on the edge of their training ground. La Masia did not just produce players, it produced a way of playing.
Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson won the league championship 13 times and the Champions League twice. Ferguson managed United for 26 years, longer than most people's careers. He was so demanding, so fierce, so consistently brilliant that players described the experience of being criticized by him as having a hairdryer pointed at your face. They called it the hairdryer treatment. Every player who survived it said it made them better. The drama of club football unfolds over 9 months every season. Relegation, the system where the worst teams in a division drop down to the lower division, gives every single match enormous stakes. A team finishing 18th instead of 17th loses their place in the Premier League, potentially forfeiting $100 million in broadcast revenue and forcing the sale of their best players. Last day of season matches have ended careers, bankrupted clubs, and sent managers into retirement. You are there on the last day of the 1989 First Division season. Liverpool lead Arsenal by 3 points. Arsenal need to win by 2 goals at Anfield, Liverpool's home ground, to take the title on goal difference. In the 91st minute, with Liverpool's fans already beginning to celebrate, Arsenal midfielder Michael Thomas receives the ball 30 yards from goal. He drives forward. He shoots. The ball bounces off the goalkeeper's legs and rolls into the net. 2 goals in the last 5 minutes, title to Arsenal. Liverpool fans stand in the stadium in absolute silence, unable to understand what has just happened. That moment, captured on film, described in books, rewatched millions of times on YouTube, is why club football matters. Not just because of what happened, but because of how much it mattered that it happened. Chapter 14. The Modern Game. Money, Stars and Billions. In 1992, something transformed English football forever. The top 20 clubs in the First Division broke away from the Football League. The same Football League formed in 1888 and created the Premier League. They negotiated a television deal with Sky B, now Sky Sports, worth £191 million over 5 years. The money poured in. Foreign players came. Stadiums modernized. Ticket prices rose. By 2024, the Premier League's total broadcast deal was worth £5.1 billion over 3 years. The league's cheapest clubs earn more in television money each season than the GDP of some small nations. Foreign ownership transformed English clubs. American investors bought Liverpool and Arsenal. Russian oligarchs bought Chelsea. Abu Dhabi royalty bought Manchester City. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund bought Newcastle United. Each new owner brought money that would have seemed impossible just 20 years earlier. Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo dominated world football for 2 decades, a period of dual greatness that had never happened before in any sport. Messi, compact and left-footed, glided past defenders as if they were standing still. Ronaldo, tall and explosive, scored with both feet and his head, generating such power that goalkeepers sometimes admitted they could not see the ball. They have won 12 Ballon d'Or awards between them, 8 for Messi, 5 for Ronaldo. They have scored over 1,300 combined career goals. Every generation argues about which one is better. The argument will never end, and it is not supposed to. Transfer fees, the money one club pays another to buy a player, spiraled to levels that would have seemed fictional 20 years ago. When Neymar moved from Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain in 2017, PSG paid €222 million, $264 million for a single player. Enough to buy a small town, more than many countries spend on their entire national sports programs in a year. The money changed the game. Some worry it changed it too much, that clubs backed by state wealth can buy success in ways that make genuine competition impossible. Others argue that the money has made the game more global, more diverse, and more spectacularly skillful than ever before. Both sides have a point. Football, like every great thing, contains its own contradictions. But here is what doesn't change, regardless of money. The child kicking a ball in a narrow street in Lagos. The girl practicing bicycle kicks in a park in Seoul. The boy juggling on a concrete court in Sao Paulo. They are playing the same game as the boy who played Cuju in ancient China. The same game as the mob football player who crashed through an English market stall in 1200 AD. The same game as Pelé,
Maradona, Marta, and Messi. No amount of money changes what happens when foot meets ball, and the ball sails through the air, and a crowd holds its breath, and the net ripples.
Chapter 15. Football changes the world.
Football is just a game. Kick the ball, score the goal. But football has also done things that diplomats could not. In 1969, Honduras and El Salvador fought a 4-day war that historians call the Football War, triggered partly by the violence at qualifying matches for the 1970 World Cup. The two nations had deep economic and immigration tensions that exploded at the football stadium. But football also built peace. In 1967, Nigeria was tearing itself apart in a vicious civil war, the Biafran War, that killed over 1 million people. A temporary ceasefire was called so that both sides could watch Pelé play an exhibition match in Lagos. The guns stopped for 2 days. Men who had been trying to kill each other stood side by side and watched a Brazilian man do things with a football that made the war feel, for 2 days, very small and very far away. In 1914, on Christmas Eve, German and British soldiers climbed out of their trenches on the Western Front in Belgium. They shook hands in the no-man's land between the trenches, and they played football in the mud between the shell craters beneath a grey winter sky. Nobody remembers who won. Nobody cared. For one afternoon, the game was more powerful than the war. Football have also driven social change. Arthur Wharton, born in Ghana in 1865, became the first professional black footballer in English history, playing as a goalkeeper in the Football League in 1889. He faced extraordinary racism from crowds, from newspapers, from opposing players, and played with courage and dignity that paved a path, however slowly, for the players who came after him. In South Africa, under apartheid, football provided one of the few spaces where black South Africans could organize, compete, and celebrate their own excellence. When Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990, one of his first public messages was a call for the international community to allow South Africa back into FIFA, a recognition that belonging to the football world meant belonging to the world itself. Jesse Owens ran, Muhammad Ali fought, Pelé played. Sport has always been a place where inequality is answered with performance, where the only thing that ultimately matters is what you do with the ball at your feet. Football does not solve inequality. It does not end war. It cannot feed anyone or build a hospital, but it speaks a language that every human being understands, the language of competition, beauty, effort, and joy. And sometimes in the right moment, that language is the most powerful one on earth.
Chapter 16. The future of the beautiful game.
The game is changing. It has always been changing. But the changes coming in the next 20 years may be the most dramatic since 1863. Video Assistant Referee Technology, VAR, arrived in professional football in 2018. A team of officials in a review center watches replays of controversial decisions, offsides, penalty claims, red card incidents, and advises the on-field referee to reconsider. Some fans love it. Many hate it. Goal celebrations are now interrupted by a 2-minute wait while officials study 14 camera angles to determine if a scorer's armpit was offside. The debate about VAR is really a debate about something deeper. What does football value more? Human instinct or mechanical precision? The answer has not yet been decided. Women's football is growing faster than any other part of the game. The 2023 Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand drew record television audiences and featured the most technically spectacular football in the competition's history. Spain won, defeating England 1-0 in the final. The Spanish team had spent the year before the tournament battling their own federation in a dispute over player welfare, and they won on the pitch despite everything they faced off it. Their triumph was not just athletic, it was political. African and Asian football is rising. The 2022 World Cup saw Morocco reach the semi-finals, the first African nation ever to do so. They defeated Spain, Portugal, and Belgium along the way, playing a fearless, organized, physically extraordinary brand of football. The continent of Africa, with 1.4 billion people and a burning love of the game, has long been underrepresented at the highest level. That is changing. In Japan and South Korea, football academies have produced generations of technically gifted players who now fill rosters across Europe. The Japanese national team regularly qualifies for and advances deep into World Cups. South Korea's Hwang Hee-chan plays for Wolverhampton Wanderers in the English Premier League. The global spread of the game has finally become genuinely global. Climate change is beginning to reshape the football calendar. The 2022 Qatar World Cup moved to November and December, unprecedented for a World Cup, because the summer heat in Qatar would have killed players. The 2026 World Cup will expand to 48 teams and be hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. By 2030, the Centenary World Cup will be hosted simultaneously on multiple continents for the first time in history. What will football look like in 50 years? Nobody knows. The tactics will be different. The technology will be different. The teams, the stadiums, the tournaments will all evolve. Some things that feel permanent today you seem strange and old-fashioned to the children who play the game in 2075. But some things will not change. 2 goals, 1 ball, 11 players against 11, 90 minutes, and at the end of it, always the truth. Someone wins, someone loses, and both sides shake hands because they both understand something that only people who have played this game truly understand. It is just a game. Chapter 17. The ball comes full circle. Step back. Look at the whole sweep of it. 2,500 years from a stuffed leather ball in ancient China to the golden arc of a free kick bending over a defensive wall in the Champions League final. Kuju players in Han Dynasty courtyards. Roman soldiers practicing harpastum in the shadow of the Colosseum. Medieval English villagers stampeding through cobbled streets after a pig's bladder. Schoolboys at Eton arguing about the rules. 12 men in a London pub voting on the laws of the game. A Brazilian sailor teaching football to Argentine dock workers. A 17-year-old named Pele flicking the ball over a Swedish defender's head. A woman named Marta growing up so poor she used a grapefruit as a ball, then becoming the greatest scorer in World Cup history. All of them connected, all of them playing the same game. The counterintuitive truth about football is this: the game's power has nothing to do with the rules, or the money, or the trophies. It has everything to do with what happens in the half-second when foot strikes ball. In that moment, every player on earth, the professional in the Premier League and the child on the dirt field in Mozambique, experiences exactly the same thing. The same impact, the same release, the same brief flight. Football asks nothing of you that you do not already have. You do not need money. You do not need equipment. You do not need to speak the local language or know anyone in the town. You need a ball, or a grapefruit, or a rag, or a pig's bladder, and one other person, and a small space of ground. That is the secret the game has kept for 2,500 years. That is why no king could ban it, and no war could erase it, and no governing body could fully control it. Football belongs to everyone. It always has. Somewhere right now, as you read this sentence, a child is running across a field. Their lungs burn, their legs ache, The ball is at their feet, and they are alone against the goalkeeper, and the whole world has shrunk down to this single moment. They shoot, the net ripples, they scream, and somewhere in ancient China, in a dusty Han Dynasty courtyard 2,500 years ago, a soldier looks up from his game and smiles, as if he somehow knew this was coming all along.